Very important topic, something that many of us ask, many of us wonder about, and very few people give us an answer that at least satisfied my heart. I don't know about you. But that question is, what is the purpose and the aim of human life? Like, why are we here? What's the point of it all? Is it simply to eat and have a house and have a family, and then we die and we leave it all behind? Is that it? So then, I mean, once you die, you leave that family behind, you leave that house behind, it's all over. And why did you go through all this? Why did you sweat and, tire yourself out and stress yourself out? If this is just a small little stop in the ocean of life and this is all you got, then why did you make such a big fuss out of it? Oh, for your family, for your kids, but then they're going to go through the same cycle as well. Is there a meaning and purpose to this existence? And I'm not just talking about your life or my life, I'm talking about this entire creation. Why would somebody make such a place? If they made it, some scientists will tell us, oh, it's just a big bang and it just happened by accident. In which case, of course, there is no purpose and there is no meaning and there is no plan and it's just something randomly happening. But how in the world do things happen by accident? Excuse me. How in the world do things happen by accident? Have you ever seen an airplane created by accident? Or a cell phone? Okay, let's make it simpler. Have you seen a shirt created by accident? Just like a big bang happened and this shirt was manufactured. Have you ever seen anything come out of a big bang except a fire and destruction? I certainly haven't. But there's a theory around in the scientific circles. All right, let's say if we reject that theory and we say God created everything. Okay, why? Why did God create everything? Is there a purpose? Is there a method to the madness? Is there a reason? And I've really spent my entire life on this question. I started at the age of 13, and when people asked me what I want to be when I grow up, I said, I certainly don't want to do what you people are doing, because I can see that whatever you're doing as far as working and getting a job and buying a house and a car, we're all going to die and leave it all behind. So I need to know why. Why am I here? What's this all about? And they thought I was nuts. They probably still think I'm nuts. And if you think I'm nuts, that's fine too. I really don't care. But to me, the answers to this question led on a very exciting and wonderful journey. And that journey is to find out the real reason. See, we can make up purposes. We can make up things that we want to do in life. We can make up goals. We can make up desires. We can make up things. But these are all being made up in our mind. We don't really have any definitive sense of what this is all about. So there are those who will tell us, oh, we're just here to go back to heaven. Well, why are we here? Why aren't we in heaven? See, I have a lot of questions. If this place is just about, going through your karma, right? Then why were we here and why did we accumulate karma in the first place? If this place is about healing, okay, but why did we get wounded? You see, if we are souls, if we are spiritual beings, and if that spiritual being is pure in every way, and if that spiritual being is eternal, and if that spiritual being is a spark of God or of the divine, then why is it here? So some say it's for lessons. Okay, what's the lesson? Oh, well, I don't know, but it's just a whole bunch of lessons. They still don't give me answers. People can be so vague. What I have learned in my study of the Vedas is this. There is a purpose. There is a method. There is an aim. And that aim is really to find out, who am I? Who is God? And what does it take to get back to where I came from, the place of God? Now, of course, the bigger question is, why am I here? If there is a God out there, then why am I here? And why am I struggling to get back? Because to find yourself is a journey to find out who you really are. If you are indeed a spark of God, you can't have that forced upon you. You can't have who you are forced upon you, and and if your relationship with God is one of love, you can't have love forced upon you. It must be chosen. You must want to know, who am I? You must want to know who is God. And when that inquiry, in Sanskrit they use the word jigyasa, when that inquiry comes within you, then you become a seeker. And when you become a seeker, you begin to ask these things and you begin to persevere and pursue the answers to these questions. So a lot of people are taken in by the fact that, oh, I'll be saved, or I'll have my problem solved, or something or someone is going to come along and going to fix everything for me. And that isn't really true. No one can fix anything for you. You have to make the journey to find who you are. And to find out who you are, you often have to be everything you're not. And we've all done that. We've done crazy things in our lives. We've been everything we shouldn't be. And in the end, we've come to realize that none of it really satisfied us. None of it really fulfilled and gave us that deep peace that we long for. None of it, none of the experience, none of the possessions, none of the relationships gave us the quality of happiness, the quality of love that we wanted. The world just wasn't enough. And so we turned to God. And unfortunately, a lot of turning to God is about ritual and about prayer and about wishful thinking. The Vedas lay out a very different path. They say, here are some practices. Try them out. Work upon yourself. Become aware of yourself. Become aware of your mind. Become aware of your thoughts. Become aware of your emotions. However, understand that you are neither your body, nor your mind, nor your emotions. Go even deeper. And as you quiet your mind and you realize that all the rubbish it's telling you, it means nothing, as you realize your thoughts are just a distraction, then you begin to go even deeper and you realize there is something within you that is truly at peace. It is always at peace whenever you go there. There is something within you that is always happy. It's abundantly happy. And nothing can take that away. No circumstance, no situation, no matter when you turn to it, no matter how you turn to it, and whatever the outer world might be showing you, but when you go within into that inner sanctum sanctorum, that inner space of deep peace is always exuding from within you. It is who you are. And then when you begin to understand that, you say, well then, if this is who I am, then this is who God is. Then all those stories they told me about God being someone judgmental and would send people to hell aren't true. This is a spark of God. And this, if you take it and multiply it millions and millions and millions of time, is when you got what you get when you have God. Which also means that God is a being, and God is a lover, and God is someone who wants to have a relationship with you just as you want to have a relationship. Every creature wants a relationship. Even your dog wants a relationship, right? And so we ourselves feel unfulfilled if we don't have a relationship. And so does God want a relationship with us. God is longing to have a relationship with us. The day we begin to long for it is when it starts to happen. Today we're going to look into the life of Dhruva a little deeper. Last time we looked at how he reached a point of self-realization, and from that realization of God, he had what is known as darshan. I'm going to recap that story a little bit for you. Let's get started. So Dhruva was a young boy of the age of 5. And at the age of 5, he had been insulted. Well, his father was a king. Let me go back a few steps earlier. His father was a king, and his father was very fond of one of his wives, Suruchi. Dhruv was the son of the other wife, Suniti. And unfortunately for the poor boy, his father didn't care for this other wife, and he favored the one wife that wasn't Dhruva's mother. So here's a scene. Let's see if I can get that on the screen for you. Having a little problem. Okay. Nope. Give me a second. See if we can still fix this technical problem here for a moment. I'd like to just... Okay. Right. All right, well, I'm not getting the pictures on the screen right now, so sorry for that. All right, so the king was very fond of one of his wives, as I was saying. Her name was Suruchi, and the other wife was Suniti. Suniti had a son named Dhruva, and unfortunately, the Dhruva was discriminated against. So one situation where the father is sitting with his other son on his lap, when Dhruva wanted to get into his father's lap, his stepmother, in the classic mode of stepmother, said, "No, you can't sit on your father's lap. You have to first pray to God and then take birth through my womb, and then you'll be able to sit on your father's lap maybe one day if you're so fortunate." Dhruva, being very hurt and offended, left the kingdom and went off to the forest. He'd heard that in the forest is where you get to meet with God. People used to go there to meditate. And in their meditations, they would have darshan. They would see God. And he went with this desire. But his desire behind the desire is not just to see God, but was also to be able to ask for what he wanted. You know, most people go to God for what they want, right? That's not a new concept for us. But we think that God is there to give us our desires. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That's what most people turn God into, some kind of Santa Claus, some kind of order supplier, someone who's going to give them what they want. Well, I don't think that the source of everything is there to fulfill our wishes. But for those who think so, well, I'll leave you to your ideas. Dhruva met Narad, and Narad Muni was his guru. Narad tried to dissuade him. He then ended up giving him a mantra. And that mantra was Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I offer respect to Bhagavan Vasudev. Bhagavan means the Supreme Being, whose name is Vasudev. That name, by the way, for God can be many. In the Vedas, God is referred to as Vishnu, as Vasudev, as Narayan, and ultimately, the ultimate representation of God is Krishna. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. He's the ultimate, the highest form of God. All right, so he met his guru Narad, who gave him the mantra. Dhruva then went off to the forest, and he continued chanting this mantra. He he started fasting, he started eating very little. He began ultimately meditating, and in that meditation on the breath and the meditation on the mantra and the meditation on the deity, he ultimately reached a place of trance. He then began standing on one foot, like you do in the tree pose in yoga. And in that state, he just completely went into a state of ecstatic connection with the divine, lost complete track of the material world, and went into a state of ecstasy, of samadhi. In that condition, Narayan, Vishnu, came to see him, and that is the Supreme Being, came to visit him because he was creating his meditations were creating a real havoc around the universe. The energy was spreading everywhere, and gave him certain blessings. And the blessings that he gave him were that he would have a kingdom that was even greater than that of his father, which is what Dhruva had ultimately wanted. And this little boy of 5 was told that he would live to be 36,000 years of age. He would inherit his father's kingdom. that he would never grow old, and he would ultimately, at the end of his life, return to the spiritual world of Vaikuntha, which is where God resides. By the way, in the Vedic concept, it's not about some heaven where angels play harps, but rather the light in which, and within that light are so many planets. Now, the planets are self-effulgent. That means there's no sun or moon or stars. They're all self-effulgent. And all the beings that live there on those planets in the light are never subject to birth or death or old age or disease. So that is the nature of the spiritual world. And Dhruv, at the end of his life, would get to go there. So let's follow up the rest of the story now. So Dhruv, at the age of 5, had achieved far more than he had ever imagined when he set out on his journey. Within 6 months, he had darshan of the Supreme Being, Vishnu. This can take yogis many, many lifetimes. Now that had happened, Dhruv was heading home. But he was not happy. He had not made any material demands, but Vishnu knew the desires in Dhruv's heart and granted him his father's kingdom and that of the highest heavenly planet, the pole star. Dhruv, however, was lamenting. He was saying to himself, alas, just look at me. I am so unfortunate. And by the way, this feeling of being unfortunate, this feeling of being unworthy, this feeling of not being good enough, this is a very powerful feeling if you use it. If you don't use it constructively, then it can be a very destructive feeling. It can lead you to great depression, and it can lead you to self-doubt. But if you use it as an act of humility, as an act of prayer, as an act of surrender to the divine, then it can be extremely uplifting. So watch how Dhruv does it. He says, alas, just look at me. I am so unfortunate. I approach the lotus feet of the Supreme Godhead, who can immediately cut the chain of the repetition of birth and death. But still, out of my foolishness, I prayed for things which are perishable. Srila Prabhupada, who has commented on these books of the Bhagavatam and so beautifully translated them, writes, one should learn from this and be anya abhilashita shunyam, or free from material aspirations. If one truly wants to find God, then one has to let go of everything in the world. The world will anyway be there. It's not that you can let go of the world. There are those who try to leave the world, but the world doesn't leave them. So the important thing is not about leaving the world, but rather of letting go the aspirations that we have for the world, realizing that none of it will truly satisfy us. If you think being a multimillionaire will satisfy you, go meet a few multimillionaires. You'll find they're not satisfied. They still want more and more and more and more, and they're never satisfied. They're never at peace. They're never really happy. Is that what you want? If you want the peace, the happiness, the satisfaction, well then that's where someone aspires for God. Now, Dhruva was coming to this realization that because of the desires in his heart, he didn't get the ultimate benediction that he could have got from meeting God, which is that the freedom from the cycle of birth and death. There was also something else going on with Dhruva. Behind Dhruva's desires, if you think about it, he wanted all this big kingdom and everything. Why did he want it? Because inside he was hurt. And that hurt, that pain that he was holding in his heart and his mind from the harsh words spoken by his stepmother. Yeah. So then he started to say to himself, under a vision of duality and looking at good and bad, I saw my brother as my enemy. I have prayed for useless things. Just see how unfortunate I am. For in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same condition again. You know, when people ask God, give me this, give me that, solve this problem, solve that problem, all they're really asking for is, I don't want you. I just want what I can get out of you. I don't care about God. I care about what I want. It's a state of selfishness. It is not a state of surrender. It is not a state of love. When we love someone, we say, I want you. I want you. And in whatever condition I have to be with you, I accept that. If I love you, I will be with you through happiness and distress, through rich and for rich and for poor. Aren't those some of the vows people take? Well, then so it is with God. Not that if you give me my desires, then I believe you exist, and if you don't give me what I want, well, then you don't exist. There's no God. So Dhruv continues, because of my state of complete foolishness, I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity. My case is like that of a poor man who, when he goes and approaches an emperor, and the emperor wants to give him anything he might ask for, out of ignorance, this poor person asks for only a few broken grains of rice. So he's in this state of lamentation. He had such a glorious opportunity and he lost it in a sense. On the other hand, it's not actually true, but he was looking at perhaps an even higher standard. He was a person of great ambition, clearly. Now, meanwhile, Dhruv's father, this young boy, remember Dhruv is 5 years old and he's missing. He's been gone for 6 months. Dhruv's father, King Uttanapad, had been suffering the guilt of his callous behavior toward his son. He considered himself to be most wretched. When a messenger arrived telling the king that his son was on his way home, the king Uttanapad was greatly overwhelmed by the news and immediately offered the messenger a highly valuable necklace in great satisfaction. Then, eager to see his son, he mounted his chariot, accompanied with priests, elders, and family members. With drums, conch shells, and instruments playing, the parade went towards the road on which Dhruv had been seen. When the king saw Dhruv, he got down from his chariot and with great love and affection embraced his long-lost son. This reminds me of the story of the prodigal son in the Bible as well, right? The son had left. He got angry. He left his father's home. And he was there in, I don't know where, but eventually found himself amongst the pigs eating their food. It's a little similar. But the point was that when he decided he'd had enough and he wanted to go home to be with his father came running to see him. In much the way God comes running to see us when we try to move towards him and makes all arrangements for us to get back home to him. So in the same way, the king here, King Uttanapad, got down from his chariot and held and hugged his son with great affection. He smelled his son's head again and again and bathed him with his tears. Dhruv offered respect to the feet of his father and his 2 mothers. So that is the way in the Vedic culture we touch the feet of our parents. When Suruchi, the one who had so meanly spoken to this innocent boy, when she saw him fall at her feet, she immediately picked him up, embraced him, and with tears of emotion she blessed him. My dear boy, long may you live. Ayushman Bhava. That is the benediction or the prayer that parents have often for their children. In the Srimad Bhagavatam it is said, unto one who has transcendental qualities due to friendly behavior with the Supreme Godhead, all living entities offer honor, just as water automatically flows down by nature. So listen very carefully. One who has formed a deep friendship with God, a love affair with God, develops transcendental qualities. And when one actually develops those transcendental qualities, all living entities offer honor, just as water automatically flows downwards by nature. Then the 2 brothers, Uttam and Dhruv, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love and affection, embraced one another with tears in their eyes. Suniti, the real mother of Dhruv, embraced the tender body of her son, who was dearer to her than her own life. And thus she forgot all material grief, for she was very pleased. The whole city was decorated with columns of banana trees containing bunches of fruits and flowers. So I've included this today in the description of the city just to get you to see how beautiful the cities, the towns of Vedic time were. People say, oh, we were ape men and women at that time. that we were Neanderthals. Well, there may have been Neanderthals, but there were also other cultures that lived thousands of years ago. Now, I don't know if these stories are from a time that may have been even before the Ice Age. May have been in other earlier times. They are histories, Puranas, describing great beings who lived on this planet and their activities and how they attained God realization. So we're not looking at a different period of time altogether. And if it defeats your sense of what was here or what archaeologists have told you, well, consider some different possibilities. That these wise people, great sages, are referring to these as itihasya, that which happened. They're not saying it happened 2,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago or even 50,000 years ago. It may have been even before that. But consider that this was the way things were. So the whole city was decorated with columns of banana trees containing bundles of fruits and flowers. There were also many gates structured to give the appearance of sharks. Every gate had burning lamps and big water pots decorated with differently colored cloth, strings of pearls, flower garlands, and mango leaves. In the capital city, there were many palaces, city gates, and surrounding walls, which were already very, very beautiful. And on this occasion, all of them were decorated with golden ornaments. The domes of the city palaces glittered, as did the domes of the beautiful airplanes which hovered over the city. All the streets in the city were thoroughly cleansed and sprinkled with sandalwood water. So you might have been a little intrigued by the thought of airplanes that hovered over the city. There's a lot of description of that in the Vedas, Viman. And there's even entire books talking about how Vimanas were to be made. However, some of the materials for that are not available in today's time. They were back then. The people of the city assembled to see Dhruva as he passed on the road, showering him with flowers and blessings. The king's palace had walls made of marble with many engravings made of valuable jewels. The palace gardens had varieties of trees brought from the heavenly planets. And in those trees, there were pairs of sweetly singing birds and bumblebees. There were emerald staircases, which led to lakes full of variously colored lotus flowers and lilies, and swans, cranes, and similar other valuable birds could be found there. The bedding in the palace was white as the foam of milk and was very soft. The bedsteads were made of ivory, with embellishments of gold, and the chairs, benches, and other sitting places and furniture were also made of gold. Now you'll see they lived clearly in the lap of luxury and had all kinds of riches and abundance. But you'll also see that it's the very same people, when they would come of age, as they would come to the end of their life, perhaps in their last 20, 25 years, they would go to the forest, leaving all of this behind and become completely renounced, sleeping on the floor, living on berries and fruits, whatever was found in the forest. That was the way. It was not about that, oh, we shall live here in our homes till the end of life. But you'll see that in the case of Dhruva. You'll even see that in the case of his father. We're getting to that part. I'm jumping ahead a bit. King Uttanapad, hearing the glorious deeds of Dhruva and finally seeing how influential and great he was, felt very satisfied, for Dhruva's activities were supremely wonderful. When Dhruva was suitably mature to take charge of the kingdom, the king observed that his ministers and the citizens were also very fond of him, and enthroned Dhruva as the emperor of this planet. So the kingdom was actually stretching across the entire planet. After considering his advanced age, so now the king, after considering his advanced age and deliberating on the welfare of his spiritual self, the king detached himself from worldly affairs and entered the forest. So like I was saying, he wouldn't go there taking along with him his finest clothes. No, he would go there with nothing, just maybe a cloth to wrap around himself, just a pair of shoes. That's about it. And no, not some famous designer wear, but rather a simple pair of wooden shoes. That would be all. And since he was older, maybe a cane. And with that, the king left to the forest. Now, Dhruva, being older, got married, had 2 wives, had children, and his brother, as had been foretold by Vishnu, brother was unmarried, and while on a hunting excursion, the brother was killed by a powerful yaksha. So there was a tribe of people called the Yakshas, and they lived in the Himalayas. And his mother went searching for him and never returned. She also died. All of this had been predicted by Vishnu when he had met with Dhruv. Dhruv, in grief and anger, got on his chariot and went to fight the Yaksha king. It doesn't say that that Dhruv went with an army. Dhruv went by himself. Dhruv was a great charioteer and bowman. He fought valiantly, but the powerful army of Yaksha soldiers showered their full strength of arrows on him, and it appeared that he would be defeated. At one point it talks about how almost like they showered him with arrows, and he would have been killed. But Dhruv shattered all their different weapons just as the blasting wind scatters the assembled clouds in the sky. King Dhruv then decimated the army of Yakshas till not one of the opposing soldiers was left standing with proper weapons. Then the mystic Yakshas unleashed weapons that made it appear as if the entire sky was overcast with dense clouds, and severe thundering was heard. So now these are weapons that created a mystical effect. These are mystical weapons, very, very powerful. And the average person would not have been able to withstand that. Listen to what they were like. So it appeared that there was lightning and severe rainfall, but that in that rainfall there was blood and mucus and pus and stool and urine and marrow falling from the sky, along with trunks of bodies. Next, a great mountain was visible in the sky, and from all directions hailstones fell, along with lances and clubs and swords and iron bludgeons and great pieces of stone. Dhruv also saw many big serpents with angry eyes, vomiting forth fire and coming to devour him, along with groups of mad elephants, lions, and tigers. Then, as if it were the time of dissolution of the whole world, the fierce sea with foaming waves and great roaring sounds came forward toward him. The Yakshas are by very nature very heinous, and their demonic power of illusion, they can create many strange phenomena to frighten one who is less intelligent. I think most of us would have been terrified to see something like this. But they're clearly indicating that this was all illusory tricks. When the great sages heard that Dhruva was overpowered by these illusory, mystical tricks, they immediately assembled to offer him encouragement. They asked him to pray to Vishnu because the name of God is as powerful as he himself. In this way, he would be protected from death. Dhruv then calmed down, stepped out of his fear, as happens when we stop being anxious and we stop being worried and we stop being fearful. He then pulled out the appropriate weapon, the Narayan Astra. It is a particular bow given to him by Narayan. Narayan is Vishnu. And this Narayan Astra arrow, as he reached to fire it, all the illusions created by the Yakshas vanished, just as all material pains and pleasures are vanquished when one becomes fully cognizant of the self. This is a beautiful line. Just as all material pains and pleasures are vanquished when one becomes fully cognizant of the self. Why do material pains and pleasures vanquished? Why are they vanquished when one becomes fully cognizant of the self? See, here's the problem. We want pleasure, we don't want pain. This is the nature of the human mind. But the fact of the matter is that with every pleasure comes pain. So today you have pleasure. If someone takes away that pleasure, there will be pain. Right? With every pleasure, there will be pain. With every positive, there is a negative. With every light, there is a shadow. It's just how it works. So if you want to get rid of pain and suffering, then you also have to get rid of this desire for pleasure. It is not that we can have good without evil. Both will come together. It is not that we can have right without wrong. Both will come together. It is not that we can have light without shadow. Wherever one exists, the opposite will also exist. If you truly want to become free of pain and pleasure, of pain, if you want to become free of suffering, if you want to become free of the mind or of the body or of any of these things, you have to be able to embrace the opposite as well. When neither of them matter, neither happiness nor unhappiness matter, neither poverty nor riches matter to you, then you are free. But till the point that you prefer, let's say, wealth to poverty, you prefer health to being sick, and of course it's natural to want that. I'm not saying it isn't natural. It is natural for a human mind and ego to want that. But when you have come in touch with the self, the real self, who you really are, not the egoic self, but the true self, then in that place, the self does not have this duality of positive and negative. I want, I don't want, I agree, I disagree. The real self does not live in this dualistic world that is created by the mind. The mind is the is the source of our pains and pleasures. It is the mind that says this is pleasurable and this is painful. Of course, there are some things that are physically painful, but even those can be withstood if we practice. After all, a runner takes on great suffering and pain by running and pushing themselves. So does someone who climbs a mountain climber, or so does someone who is working out in a gym, so does someone who is working at a job. We all do unpleasant things because we think they're going to give us pleasure afterwards. And that is true. We voluntarily take on the hardships of life. Anyway, let me get back to the story and we'll continue. Maybe we'll come back. If you have any questions, by the way, feel free to ask. Put them down in the chat. I do read all the chat. I do read all the questions and I do attempt to answer them as much as possible. So now these yakshas, when all their mystical stuff kind of got pushed away, they resumed their attack on Dhruva with even more ferocity, but he vanquished them with his arrows. When Dhruva's grandfather, Swayambhava Manu, was witnessing this from a distance, when he saw him killing so many innocent yakshas, he rushed in to stop him. He informed Dhruva that his actions were going too far, and he was now, and his actions were against the family values and the laws of Dharma. He emphasized that Dhruva's anger was valid. He empathized with him, but did not approve of the killing of innocent people for the wrong of one. See, one person had done wrong, but it doesn't mean thousands and thousands of people had to pay the price for that. He reminded Dhruva about how he had pleased Vishnu as a boy, and then told him that the Supreme is most satisfied when one treats others with tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. One who actually satisfied the Supreme Godhead during one's lifetime becomes liberated from suffering and achieves unlimited spiritual bliss. Manu, the grandfather of Dhruva, went on to explain to him the Supreme Godhead by his inconceivable supreme energy, time. So time is one of the energies of God. The Supreme Being through time causes varieties of energies to become manifest as this universe. By his inconceivable power, everything is happening. It appears that he is acting, but he is not the actor. He is ever existing, but in the form of time, he is the killer of everything. He has no beginning, although he is the beginning of everything. He is always inexhaustible, although everything is exhausted in due course of time. The living entities are created through the agency of the Father, whoever that parent might be, and killed through the agency of death. But he, the Supreme Being, is perpetually free from birth and death. He is neutral toward everyone. No one is his ally, no one is his enemy. Within the jurisdiction of time element, everyone enjoys or suffers the result of their own karma. As when the wind blows, small particles of dust fly in the air, so according to one's particular karma, one suffers or enjoys material life. But you see, the wind is not responsible for that. Similarly, God is not responsible for the effects that we experience in our life. Therefore, asking God to take away the effects of our karma, which is what causes us both the good and the bad that we experience in life, is meaningless. We need to be able to go through that, through the karmic effects, because they're designed to help us understand the consequences of our actions. If those actions were good, then the consequences are good, so-called good. And if those actions were harmful to others, then we need to understand what it feels like. So karma actually shows us a mirror to our actions. It shows us what it feels like to be at the receiving end of what we did to someone else. Manu continues, the absolute truth is transcendent. He is never subject to the understanding of our imperfect senses, nor is he subject to direct experience. No one can understand his plans or actions. My dear son, these yakshas are not actually the killer of your brother. The birth and death of every living entity are caused by the Supreme, who is the supreme cause of all causes. I want to pause here for a moment. Does it mean, therefore, that God is the cause of everything that happens in the world? Well, he's speaking from a much, how do you say, from a bigger perspective. And that is that because everything is the energy of God, and because everything is happening as part of the will of God, the will of God is what? To allow for us to have these experiences and learn from them and realize through them who we are and who we're not. See, to arrive at the actual goal of life. So, even these experiences Dhruva is having will bring him closer to God, provided someone is there to guide him. And that's what's happening in the case of his grandfather Manu coming to guide him here. So, yes, on one hand, God is the cause of all causes. The Brahma Samhita, Brahma says, when he sees Vishnu, he says, Ishvara Parama Krishna, the supreme Ishvara, controller of the entire universe, is Krishna. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchit Ananda Vigraha. He has a form that is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Anadir Adir Govinda. So Govinda, another name for Krishna, is Anadi. He is beginningless. Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. Now, we are saying that it's not that he directly writes in a book, oh, this person has to die at this time and that person has to go through. It's not like that. It's all automated. Each person will receive the effects of their karma, plain and simple. And just as we have AI now and we have advanced computers, everything is kept track of. God is not personally involved in any of it. And yet, being the creator, being the cause of everything in a bigger sense, like the CEO takes responsibility of everything that happens in the company. In the same way, we can say that yes, the Supreme Being is the ultimate cause of everything that happens in this world, whether good or bad. And unfortunately, in the eyes of spirit, in the eyes of the divine, there is no good or bad. The spirit operates from a non-dualistic platform in which there is no good or bad, right or wrong. These are the experiences we have in the world. But from the point of view of the soul or of God, all of these are wonderful opportunities if one learns how to extract the true meaning behind them. Then one no longer suffers, just like extracting the pearl from the oyster, just like extracting the wisdom from any given situation and learning to find how it changed your life or the beauty of that. Very often afterwards we can reflect back and we can see how a situation impacted us, changed our life, transformed us. I know it did in my life so many times. Things that felt so wrong, felt so bad, turned out to be the greatest blessings. So Manu continues, please turn your attention to the Supreme Person who is the infallible Brahman. Brahman is that energy of the universe. Thus, by self-realization, you will find this material differentiation to be merely flickering and will very soon forget the illusory understanding of I and my. So remember, the first cause where Dhruva felt so hurt was because his brother was being allowed to sit in his father's lap and he was not being allowed. So there was an ego thing there. Here again, his brother was killed, and now he was angry against the people who had killed his brother. Again, I and mine. Right? You think that is the cause of suffering. I and mine. Manu continues, consider what I have said to you and control your anger, for anger is the foremost enemy on the path of spiritual realization. A person who desires liberation from this world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others. My dear Dhruv, by killing great numbers of yakshas, your actions have been very disrespectful to Kuber. Kuber is the treasurer of the demigods and the brother of Shiva, as well as the head of the yakshas. And you have agitated him. You should immediately pacify Kuber with gentle words and prayers, and thus his wrath may not affect our family. After saying all this, Manu left. Dhruva's anger now subsided. The great wisdom of his grandfather eased his heart and his spirit, and he realized where he was going wrong. He ceased killing the yakshas and then begged the forgiveness of Kuber, the king of the yakshas. Kuber blessed him. Kuber was very enlightened as well. So he says, I am very glad to know that under the instruction of your grandfather you have given up your enmity, although it is very difficult to avoid. I am very pleased with you. Actually, you have not killed the yakshas, that was his soldiers, nor have they killed your brother. For the ultimate cause of generation and annihilation is the eternal time feature of the Supreme Lord. Misidentification of oneself and others as I and you on the basis of identification with the body is a product of ignorance. So what is the alternative, by the way, to I and you? To recognize that there is no difference between I and you. That is the place of awakening for the spiritually enlightened. To see the soul within everyone, within all creatures, within all beings. To recognize that there is no difference between that which lies within me and that which lies within you. Just to recognize that we are of the same stuff. We are like different cells in the same body. We are of the same body. But you know what happens when the cells begin to attack the body itself? That's what we call cancer. Right? When the cells begin, the body turns against itself. That's what happens when we turn against another one of us. When we separate ourselves into I and you, when we do not see how we are connected and how we are in fact of the same body, so to speak, the universal body. At the same time, we are individual. We are similar. We are the one, and we are different simultaneously. That is the philosophy of Chaitanya. Chaitanya taught achintya bhed abhed tattva, that we are simultaneously one with God and yet different from God. We are tiny infinitesimal sparks of God. We are not the infinite. Similarly, you and I are one. We have the same essence, and yet there are differences. So we are simultaneously one and different. And when you understand that, then you realize then there is neither any separation nor is there any need for us to be in conflict with each other. Kuber continued, my dear Dhruv, may the Supreme Lord always grace you with good fortune. Then he asked Dhruv if he would want a benediction. And the intelligent and thoughtful King Dhruv begged that he might have unflinching faith in and remembrance of the Supreme Godhead, for thus a person can easily cross over the ocean of nescience. Nescience meaning darkness. So to cross over the ocean of darkness, what does one need? Unflinching faith in and remembrance of the Supreme Godhead. That's what Dhruva asked for. He could have had anything. Kuber was known to be the treasure of the demigods. He could have given him unlimited wealth, but he asked only for this: unflinching faith in and remembrance of the Supreme Godhead, for thus a person can easily cross over the oceans of nescience. Kuber was very pleased and blessed Dhruv. Dhruv then returned to his capital city. As a king, he was endowed with all godly qualities. And here we get to see what a good king is like. He was endowed with all godly qualities. He was very respectful to the devotees of God and very kind to the poor and innocent. And he protected the principles of dharma. He was considered by all citizens to be their father. Dhruv ruled for 36,000 years and then handed over the kingdom, which extended all over the earth and was bounded by great oceans, to his son. He retired to the forest at Badrik Ashram in the Himalayas. There he bathed regularly in the crystal clear, purified water. He fixed his sitting position and by yogic practice controlled the breathing process and the prana, or the life air. In this way his senses were completely purified and withdrawn. Then he meditated on the deity form of Vishnu and entered into complete trance. Due to transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering, and the hairs all over his body stood on end. In that state of trance, Dhruv completely forgot his bodily existence and immediately became liberated from material bondage. See, this transcendental bliss that is described here is very important to understand. One cannot imitate it, but it is the fruit of having attained love of God. So let me read it again to you. This is what lies ahead for someone who has completely devoted themselves to this path. This is not the goal, but this is just one of the byproducts that occurs that lets you know that you're on the right track. Due to transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. These tears are tears of joy. His heart melted. This is such an important piece. Right now, our hearts can be very hardened by the ways of the world, by the things we have suffered, by the things people have said. But now his heart melted, and there was shivering, and the hairs all over his body stood on end in ecstatic rapture. See, so those are some of the symptoms. Now at this point, Dhruv saw a very beautiful airplane coming down from the sky, as if the brilliant full moon were coming down, illuminating all directions. Since it describes it as like a brilliant full moon, I wonder if it was in fact like a UFO. Though the pictures that I've seen drawn by artists show more of a bird-like creature, but the description given here almost sounds like a UFO, so I'll leave that to your imagination. In any case, a beautiful airplane of some kind came down, and two very beautiful associates of Vishnu emerged from there. They had 4 hands, a dark bodily luster. They were very youthful. Their eyes were just like reddish lotus flowers. They held clubs in their hands, and they were dressed in very attractive garments with helmets and decorated with necklaces, bracelets, and earrings. They said to Dhruv, "Dear king, please attentively hear what we have to say. When you were only 5 years old, you underwent severe austerities, and you thereby greatly satisfied the Supreme Being. We are representatives of that Supreme Godhead, the creator of the universe, and we have been deputed to take you to the spiritual world, to the planet where Vishnu personally resides. What you have achieved is very difficult even for great sages and demigods. Now please come. You are welcome to go there to live eternally." Dhruv's body now became as brilliant as molten gold. As he was attempting to get on the transcendental plane, he saw death personified approach him. He saw this dark shadow. Okay. Dhruv's body, as I said, became brilliant as molten gold. As he was attempting to get on the transcendental plane, he saw death personified approach him, so like a dark shadow that came. Not caring for death, Dhruv took advantage of the opportunity to put his feet on the head of death, and thus got up on the airplane, which was as big as a house. So this idea of putting your feet on the head of death is a sort of symbolic representation of transcending death. As they were about to leave, he remembered his mother Suniti and wondered how he could go alone without her. The associates of Vishnu could read his mind and assured him that his mother was going forward in another plane. As they flew past the planets of the solar system, the demigods showered his airplane with flowers. The self-effulgent Vaikuntha planets, by whose illumination alone all the illuminating planets within this material world give off reflected light, cannot be reached by those who are not merciful to other living entities. Let me backtrack a little. The Vaikuntha planets are the planets of Vishnu, the planets in where he resides. They are within the light. Okay, so you have the light and you have the Vaikuntha planets within that. This is called the spiritual world. So just as much as we live in the material world, there is a spiritual world. I know in some religions they call it heaven, but here it's much more specific. The people that live there, what they do, what their life is like, everything is this. Lots of detail is given. And we've talked about it in earlier episodes as well. So here it talks about the self-effulgent Vaikuntha planets, meaning there is no sun or moon that they are self-effulgent. They give off a light. There is this light that is there. That light is what illuminates the planets, the sun, the moon, etc. within this world, which then give off that reflected light. The spiritual world cannot be reached by those who are not merciful to other living entities. You see how important that is? Being merciful to other living entities. That includes the animals, that includes the plants, and that includes each other, and that includes yourself. To be merciful to all living entities. One cannot reach the kingdom of God without being merciful to all living entities. Only persons who constantly engage in welfare activities for all other living beings can reach the Vaikuntha planets. Persons who are peaceful, equipoised, cleansed, and purified, and who know the art of pleasing all other living entities, keep friendship with the devotees of God. They alone can very easily achieve the perfection of going back home, back to Godhead. Think about this. If we didn't know how to do that, if we were just nasty, mean, horrible people who liked a particular race and not another, or liked a particular color and not another, who liked a certain segment of people but not the other, if we, in that state of mind, reached the kingdom of God, we would turn even that place into hell, just as we've done here on earth. So it's very clear there are certain qualities we need to cultivate while we're here. And those qualities do not have any egoic representation within them. One has to become free of the ego, free of I and mine, free of any identification with the body or the mind to be able to attain that place. It's not just about being saved. It's not just about being blessed even. You know, Dhruva was blessed, yes, but he still had to do the work. On hearing the narration of Dhruva Maharaj, one can fulfill desires for wealth, reputation, and increased duration of life. This narrative is so powerful that it can counteract all the result of one's karmic activities or one's sinful actions. Anyone who hears the narration of Dhruva and who repeatedly tries with faith and devotion to understand his pure character attains the pure devotion to the Supreme Godhead. By such activities, one can diminish the miserable conditions of material life. The narration of Dhruva is sublime knowledge for the attainment of immortality. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I had to summarize about 3 or 4 chapters to be able to bring it all within one episode here. It takes a lot of work, and I hope that it has been meaningful for you. All right, let's take a look at what questions we've got, and if somebody would like to share their thoughts. Okay, just a minute. Right. So Celia has asked, can it be that God came into being as we do from a similar first cause? Okay, let me see if I can get this out here. So can it be that God came into being as we do from a similar first cause, to know thyself from within and without, in ways that include experience from a collective all. Okay. Similar first cause. I'm not sure what you're meaning by that, but let me take a look at the second comment as well, and maybe it'll all make sense. To add, the oversoul or higher self collects experiences from all our lifetimes and those we interact with, expanding its knowledge of being. Seems there is a link for God to be, as do we. So I think you're saying that. Okay, so first let's talk about the cause of all causes. I think that's the beginning of your question. That if there is a cause behind us, then there is a cause behind God. Well, the real purpose, the real point of this is, firstly, Bhagavad Gita establishes that we are all eternal. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. So that life is eternal. The soul is eternal. God is eternal. It's not that God created us or we created God. It is that we are all energy and therefore eternal beings. Now, when it says God is the cause of all causes, meaning whatever manifestation you see within this world is ultimately caused by God. Certainly you and I do things. We create things, we manifest things, we make things happen within this world. But even the very things we do, even the mind was not created by us, the body was not created by us, the materials that we use within this world were not created by us. They were all created by God. Now we're taking those materials and we're playing around with them like children do in a playground or in a sandbox. And then we're making sandcastles out of that. So that activity is certainly being done by us, but even the ability to do that is created by God. The very heartbeat we have, if it stops, we are no more. So how powerful are we? If our breathing were to stop, finished. If the sun stopped shining, if the air stopped being there, right? If the air just got sucked out of here, what would happen? What power would you have? What would all the riches in the world be able to get you? Nothing. So death comes for all. And even in this life, we have very little to no power. But silly, try and help me with the question you're asking. Let me see, you've got one more here. A paradoxical question. Do we exist for God or does God exist for us? It's better to think as existing with a coexistence or co-create. Okay. Your question is phenomenal. It asks, do we exist for God or does God exist for us? Oh, that's brilliant. My sense of that is it's a two-way street. That we exist for God, that through God, that we when you create something, like do our children exist for us or do we exist for our children? It's a very symbiotic relationship. Just as much as God longs for us, there comes a time where we begin to understand God and we begin to long for God. Just as much as God learns from us through our experiences, so do we learn from God. When we begin to understand we are together in this, it's not God versus us. God is simply bringing us back to our true nature and our true self. God is not trying to take us away from who we are, but rather bring us back to who we are. Bring us back to appreciating and understanding who we are, and then helping us live from that place. All the processes that are there are simply there to help us overcome the obstacles of this world and of our own mind and body. So while they sometimes feel like they're either a ritual or they feel like I have to chant a mantra or I have to go through a certain process, all of that is really to help us overcome the influence of the world. And to the degree that we do, we're able to live in a place that is deeply from the heart and from the soul. That is what God wants for us, is to return to ourself and to return home to God. Understand that we have a loving relationship, and that when you love someone, you want to be with them. Just as the father of Dhruva rushed out to hold his son in his arms and wept, so also it is with God. So also, when we meet each other, know that we are connecting. Coming back home to each other is the same as coming back home to God. It is not literally the same, but it is that sense of homecoming. When you come across a fellow traveler on this path, it is that kind of feeling of coming home. When you come back to yourself, it is that same feeling. When you come back to God, it is the same feeling, except that it is much deeper. I remember this beautiful temple in Vrindavan, Banke Bihari. We used to go there to visit every month, and this wonderful person I knew, Asudaram, who was very much a mentor for me, he once said to me, he says, you think you're coming to see Bihariji, the deity in the temple. He says, you have no idea how he stands there, dresses up, and waits for you day after day after day. When will my Rohit come? When will he come to see me again? And then when you finally come, you only have a few minutes for him. But he waits every single day for you. It was just such an incredible thought to understand that as much as we think we're trying to come to God, God is a million times more wanting us to reconnect and reunite. Think about that. All right, with that we'll end, and I will see you next week. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna. Radhe Radhe. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. And I look forward to seeing you the next time.